When I was 23, I worked as a night auditor at the Belhurst Castle in Geneva, New York. It wasn't my dream job, but the pay was decent, and honestly, working in a castle felt pretty cool at first. The place had been converted into a luxury hotel and restaurant, but it still maintained that old-world charm that drew tourists from all over. I'd heard the ghost stories, of course. Everyone who worked there had. The managers even encouraged them. Good for business, they said. Guests loved hearing about Isabella, the opera singer who supposedly haunted the upper floors, or Dick O'Brien, the old caretaker who died back in '72. I figured it was all nonsense, just clever marketing to give the place some character. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which meant I spent most nights alone in that massive stone structure. The first few weeks were uneventful. I'd do my paperwork, walk the halls every couple hours, and catch up on Netflix between tasks. The castle was eerily quiet at night, but I got used to it. Then came that October night that changed everything. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I heard it. This faint singing coming from somewhere above me. Not modern music, but something classical, operatic. My first thought was that a guest had left their TV on too loud. I grabbed my master key and headed upstairs to investigate. The singing grew clearer as I climbed the spiral staircase to the third floor. It was beautiful, haunting even, but definitely not coming from a television. It sounded live, like someone was actually performing. I followed the sound down the hallway, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The singing was coming from the tower suite, our most expensive room. According to my computer, it was vacant that night. I knocked softly, not wanting to wake other guests if someone had somehow snuck in. The singing stopped immediately. I waited a moment, then used my key to open the door. The room was empty, exactly as housekeeping had left it. But the air felt different, colder, heavier somehow. And there was this smell, like old roses mixed with something metallic. As I turned to leave, I saw her in the mirror's reflection, a young woman in a white Victorian dress, standing right behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. I practically ran back to the front desk, telling myself I was just tired, seeing things. But then I noticed something on the security monitor. An elderly man was walking up the main staircase, wearing what looked like maintenance coveralls from decades ago. The problem was, our maintenance guy had gone home hours earlier. I watched as this figure climbed the stairs with a deliberate, measured pace. He reached the second floor and walked down the hallway toward the library. I knew I had to check it out. It was my job, after all. The library was Dick O'Brien's favorite spot, according to the stories. Guests claimed to see him sitting in the leather chair by the fireplace, just watching them. When I entered the library, that exact chair was slowly rocking, as if someone had just gotten up from it. That's when things went from creepy to terrifying. The lights throughout the entire castle began flickering, not just dimming, violently flashing on and off like a strobe light. Then came the laughter. It wasn't joyful or warm. It was hollow, echoing through the halls from every direction at once. Books started flying off the shelves. Not falling, flying, like someone was throwing them. A vase on the mantel shattered without anyone touching it. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. I ran for the front entrance, but the massive oak doors wouldn't budge. They were locked from the inside, which should have been impossible. The key wouldn't even turn in the lock. My phone had no signal, and the landline was dead. That's when I remembered the construction worker stories. How one had fallen from the tower during construction and died. How another had gone insane while working on the roof, claiming the castle didn't want to be built. The singing started again, but this time it was accompanied by screaming. Horrible, anguished screaming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Pictures fell from their hooks. The chandelier in the main hall swayed violently. I spent the next 4 hours huddled behind the front desk, listening to the castle come alive around me. Footsteps ran up and down the stairs. Doors slammed, windows rattled. At one point, I swear I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder, but I was too terrified to look. Finally, At exactly 6 a.m., everything stopped. The lights came back on. The doors unlocked. My phone suddenly had full bars. It was like someone had flipped a switch. When the day manager arrived at 7, I told her I was quitting. She didn't seem surprised. Apparently, I'd lasted longer than most night auditors. As I was leaving, she mentioned something that still gives me chills. She said the worst nights were always when someone disturbed Isabella's room, the tower suite, the same room I'd entered that night. I found out later that 3 other night auditors had quit after similar experiences. One had even been hospitalized for exhaustion after claiming he'd been chased through the castle by invisible forces. I drive past Belhurst sometimes and I still get goosebumps. It's beautiful during the day, full of tourists and wedding parties. But I know what lurks there after dark. Some places aren't meant to be hotels. Some histories can't be renovated away. Whatever haunts that castle, Isabella, Dick O'Brien, or something else entirely, it's real. And it doesn't want company after midnight. When I was 22, I took a backpacking trip through Eastern Europe with my college roommate, Marcus. We'd saved up for months, planning to hit all the typical spots: Prague, Budapest, Vienna. But Marcus had this obsession with abandoned places and local legends, always dragging me to some creepy location he'd found on obscure forums. That's how we ended up at Houska Castle, about an hour north of Prague. Marcus had read about it on some paranormal blog, a 13th century Gothic castle built over what locals called the Gateway to Hell. I thought it was just tourist bait, honestly. But the rental car was cheap, and Marcus wouldn't shut up about it, so we went. The drive out there should have been our first warning. The GPS kept losing signal, and the locals in the last village we passed through literally crossed themselves when we asked for directions. One old woman grabbed my arm and said something in Czech that Marcus later translated as "don't look down into it." We laughed it off at the time. The castle sat on this limestone cliff, completely isolated, surrounded by thick forest. What struck me immediately was how wrong it looked. Most castles are built for defense, high walls facing outward, windows positioned for archers. But Houska's defenses faced inward, like it was built to keep something in rather than keep enemies out. The tour guide, this thin guy named Pavel, met us at the entrance. There were only 3 other tourists, a middle-aged German couple and a solo traveler from Japan. Pavel's English was decent, and he started with the usual historical stuff. But when he got to why the castle was built, his whole demeanor changed. "In the 13th century," he said, leading us through a narrow stone corridor. Locals reported strange creatures emerging from a massive hole in the ground here. Black-winged beings, half-animal demons, things that shouldn't exist. The Duke ordered prisoners to be lowered into the hole on ropes. The first man was pulled up after just seconds, screaming. His hair had turned white, and he'd aged 30 years. He died within days, raving about what he'd seen below. The German woman scoffed, but I noticed her husband had gone pale. Pavel continued as we entered what he called the chapel, built directly over where the hole supposedly was. The floor was solid stone now, of course. But standing there, I felt this weird pressure in my ears, like being in an airplane descending too fast. That's when things got uncomfortable. The Japanese tourist suddenly dropped to his knees, pressing his palms against the floor. He was muttering something in Japanese, getting louder and more agitated. Pavel rushed over, trying to help him up, but the guy started screaming, this horrible primal sound that made my skin crawl. The German couple immediately left, but Marcus and I stayed, mainly because we were too shocked to move. Pavel and I finally got the tourist to his feet. His eyes were completely bloodshot, and he kept pointing at the floor, speaking rapid Japanese that none of us understood. Pavel called for medical help and escorted him outside. Marcus wanted to explore more while Pavel was gone. I should have said no. But we'd come all this way, and honestly, I was curious about what had triggered that tourist's breakdown. We found a door Pavel hadn't shown us, leading to a narrow spiral staircase going down. The temperature dropped at least 15 degrees as we descended. Our phone flashlights barely penetrated the darkness. The walls were covered in these weird scratches, not like graffiti, but deep gouges in the stone, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. At the bottom, we found a small circular room. The floor was different here, not stone, but packed dirt, with a large iron grate in the center, maybe 3 feet across. Marcus knelt down, shining his light through the bars. The beam just disappeared into blackness below. Then we heard it. This low vibration, almost below the range of human hearing, coming from beneath the grate. It wasn't mechanical. It was organic, like breathing, but wrong. The air itself seemed to thicken, and I started feeling dizzy. Marcus grabbed the grate, trying to lift it, and I swear I heard something whisper his name from below. I yanked him backward just as footsteps echoed down the stairs. Pavel appeared, furious. He grabbed us both and practically dragged us up the stairs, cursing in Czech the whole way. At the entrance, he shoved us outside and told us never to come back. Some doors, he said, should never be opened. Some things should stay buried. The drive back to Prague was silent. Marcus had this 1,000-yard stare, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night in our hostel, he woke up screaming 3 times, mumbling about black wings and endless falling. He flew home the next day, cutting the trip short. I found out later that the Japanese tourist had been institutionalized. His family claimed he'd never had mental health issues before Houska. Marcus dropped out of grad school a month after returning home. Last I heard, he was living with his parents, taking heavy medication for what doctors called acute psychotic episodes. As for me, I still have nightmares about that whisper from beneath the grate. Sometimes in the space between waking and sleeping, I hear that low vibration again. And sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't pulled Marcus back. What was down there, waiting in the darkness? What did those prisoners see that drove them mad in seconds? Some say Houska Castle was built to seal hell itself. After what I experienced, I believe them, and I pray that seal never breaks.